I'm joined now by the House Speaker, Paul Ryan. He's giving us an exclusive interview. Mr. Speaker, it's always nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Good to have you.
It's a busy time. You spent some time with the President at the White House yesterday going over the agenda. One of the things we learned yesterday was a little more about the outline for his budget. He is planning massive spending increases in the areas of the military, intelligence, national security, and to offset that, massive cuts in other domestic programs. And he says he will not touch Social Security and Medicare. Does this work?
Well, we haven't seen the full budget yet. You just saw a piece of the budget, which is what a new administration always does. But this is a promise that he made that we also ran on, which is our military has been hollowed out. We have gutted our military in many, many ways, and we've had huge increases in domestic spending. So he's trying to get that balance right. We have long believed that we've put our spending out of balance on what we call discretionary spending. We have hurt the military, and we've given a lot of lift in other areas. So he's trying to get that balance right.
Are there enough cuts to be made in discretionary spending? And if you don't touch entitlements like Social Security and Medicare, and I don't have to remind you, you've been talking about this for a very long time. It's not popular, but you've said we've got to make tough choices on those entitlements. Can he balance this budget out without touching them?
Well, we've never proposed, and this is what I think the President is talking about, we've never proposed to change benefits for current seniors and people who are about to retire. So within what we call the 10-year budget window, we budget on a 10-year basis. We're not saying we're going to change benefits for anybody in or near retirement. No one has ever proposed that. What people like me have been saying is, for those of us in the younger generation, those of us who are X-Gen on down, these programs will be bankrupt by the time we get there. We had to reform them for the next generation.
But does the President agree with that? Because the New York Times, for example,
I believe he does.
On
Social Security, that problem is not as acute as our health care problem. Doing Obamacare reform, replacing Obamacare is entitlement reform, and that helps us with health care. But I think the point he's trying to make with the first piece of his budget, much to follow, is our military has been hollowed out. I just met with the Admiral who runs the Pacific Command yesterday, talking about how they're just running out of munitions. They have a real problem, and he's trying to address that.
You just mentioned health care. Let's go there. Last time we sat down in your office was January 12th, 2016. And I talked to you. I said, how come...
We've cleaned the place up a little bit since then.
Yeah, you've done a good job around here. I said to you then, why is it that Republicans have been trashing Obamacare for 6 years, at that point, 7 years now, and not presented a viable replacement? You said, Matt, by the end of this year, we will have that plan for you. That deadline came and went.
We ran on a plan last year.
But you didn't give us a plan that can be voted on now, and you know that Republicans within their own party have deep disagreements over how to replace Obamacare. So do the American people have a right to say, we've heard the criticism for year after year, and yet we still don't have something that can be put on the President's desk?
That's exactly what we're doing right now. See, we're not writing some bill in the back room in Harry Reid's office like Obamacare was written. We're going through the committee process. We're doing this step by step. We're having public hearings. We're having committees work on legislation. This is how the legislative process is supposed to be designed, not hatching some bill in a back room and then plopping it on the American people's front door.
Your predecessor made your job a little tougher last week. John Boehner came out and he said all this talk about repeal and replace, it's not going to happen. He says it's happy talk. What they're going to do is they're going to fix some bad parts of Obamacare and wrap it in a conservative box. That is not repeal and replace.
That is not what we are doing. Let me just say it this way. Obamacare is collapsing. Obamacare had, I think the Democrats got too far ahead on their ideology, and they gave us a system where the government runs health care. They gave us a system where costs went up, not down. They gave us a system where choices went away. They gave us a system where people lost the health care plans that they liked, that they chose. That violated all the promises that were made, that were given when Obamacare was sold to the American people. Those promises were violated. And now we have a collapsing marketplace. We really believe we're in a rescue mission here to step in and prevent this collapse from occurring further.
I just want to say that a lot of people disagree with that terminology that Obamacare is collapsing under its own weight.
I'll just quote Aetna. They said that it's in a death spiral.
Let me read you something the President said just yesterday. Again, this is a guy who ran. One of the things he ran on was, I'm going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And yesterday, speaking to some governors about health care, he said this, and I'm quoting, I have to tell you, it's an unbelievably complex subject. Nobody knew health care could be so complicated. Nobody knew health care could be so complicated. As a details guy.
I've been working on health care for a couple decades.
As a policy wonk, Doesn't that take your breath away when the President of the United States says nobody knew it could be so complicated?
He's a business guy who came to office not as some policy wonk, working in Congress on health care.
But how do you run on repealing and replacing Obamacare if you didn't know it's a complicated procedure?
Well, he knew it was a complicated procedure. He ran on repealing and replacing Obamacare because Obamacare broke all its promises and is breaking the health care system. The bill that we're working on is the bill that we ran on last year. The bill that we're working on is the bill we're working with the Senate and the White House. It's much like the bill that Tom Price, who was sort of the gold standard reformer of health care, introduced last year. He is now the Health and Human Services Secretary. Here's the point let's just take a step back. People want peace of mind in a healthcare system. People want to be able to have choices in a healthcare system. We want to get costs down. We want to give people more choices. We believe in a patient-centered system where all the providers of healthcare services, be they hospitals or doctors or insurance companies, compete against each other for our business as patients, as consumers. We should make decisions on how healthcare works, not some distant government bureaucrat, which is restricting our choices down to the point where a third of counties in America have only one plan to choose from.
Back to the bigger picture, though, doesn't it seem often, Mr. Speaker, that President Trump talks about big ideas without diving into the details of how to accomplish his promises, like I'm going to defeat ISIS, or I'm going to repeal and replace Obamacare, or I'm going to build that wall and the Mexicans are going to pay for it? As a guy who dives into details, and you do, doesn't that frustrate you sometimes?
Not really. I see him as more of a chairman, as a president, much like many successful presidents have been, where he gets people around him who are detailed people who can execute those plans. You hired Jim Mattis to be your Secretary of Defense to come up with a plan to defeat ISIS. You put Tom Price, an orthopedic surgeon, chairman of the Budget Committee, who's been working on healthcare for his entire adult life, in charge of healthcare. You hire and surround good people.
Delegate the details.
Delegate the details to good people who know what they're doing, who have experience in these matters, and you make sure that the objectives are met, that the goals that you ran on for the American people to improve their lives are met. That is exactly the kind of commander-in-chief I think we need in this country.
A couple of really quick things. I spoke to former President Bush yesterday on the subject of possible Russian ties to Trump's associates during the campaign. He says the American people need answers. Is there anything you could hear that would make you decide we need a special prosecutor to look into that?
Well, that's the executive branch of government.
I understand.
We think we need to do an investigation here with our intelligence committees. There's one thing that's unique about this, which is this gets into the methods of collection of intelligence data, sources and methods. That's very, very sensitive. It's the most sensitive tool in our national security toolbox. That is why we have an intelligence committee of men and women in Congress who have gone through the process of understanding those tools. And so that, to me, is where the investigation. We're beginning an investigation.
It's an intelligence committee with a majority of Republicans, and people want an independent investigation.
It's a bipartisan investigation. Both the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees are beginning their investigations right now. We've had one for a while. We're increasing the scope of that investigation. But here's the point, Matt. You've got to be mindful of the sources and methods of our intelligence community so you don't compromise how we collect and gather intelligence while we get answers to these questions. Don't forget, the Obama administration had an exhaustive investigation before they left office on this point. The point is we need to get answers. We need to make sure that nothing happened that shouldn't have happened as we go forward. That's exactly what we do in our jobs as Congress, but we think the Intelligence Committee is the right place to do it.
We're going to spend a little more time with you this morning, take a little bit of a tour outside your office. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we fixed the place up.
You did, and I appreciate you joining us this morning. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.